Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Jones. Welcome to interCHANGE. Again this week, we're going to spend the entire show talking about Governor Scott Walker's proposed budget and the battles taking place in Madison between the public employee unions and Governor Walker. Again this week, I ask that we please make sure this is a courteous as well as a passionate conversation.
Guaranteed.
Let me once again introduce you to everyone. We have newspaper columnist Joel McNally, Kevin Fischer, now Public Information Officer for WEDA, the Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Authority, and oftentimes a fill-in host over at WISN Radio. Denise Callaway, she's the Coordinator of Business and Community Partnerships for the Milwaukee Public School System. And Gerard Randall, Consultant and Local Job Creation Expert. Rick Horowitz will be along with commentary at the end of the show. All right, let's get right into it once again. Scott Walker continues to shake things up, proposing a budget that would dramatically reshape how things are done in Wisconsin. Cutting aid to public schools, municipalities, public universities, technical colleges, but telling all those entities, hey, I'm trying to give you the tools to make up for it by letting you get the money back by making your employees pay more out of their own pocket for benefits. But one thing he prohibits them from doing is raising local property taxes. It is a radical plan that is really freaking a lot of people out. In the meantime, the Democratic state Senate officers continue to refuse to come back to Madison from Illinois, so very little can actually be voted on, up or down. Joel, how do you think this is going to play out? Some people think it's coming to an end.
Well, maybe some of the collective bargaining thing they're trying to reach some agreement on, but this budget is just the next boot. I mean, if wiping out collective bargaining was controversial, this budget should be 10 times as controversial. Scott Walker actually said during his budget address that this was the lowest budget in the state of Wisconsin in the last 14 years, lowest budget ever submitted by a governor, Republican or Democrat. That is nothing to be proud of. We're coming out of the deepest recession since the Great Depression, when the needs in this state are greater than they have been in all of our lifetimes. And the state is going to do less. They're going to slash aid to local governments. And you said give them tools? I don't see any tools here. He slashes aid and then says you can't make it up by raising any property taxes to pay for anything. So all you can do is lay off people or slash their wages. Those aren't tools to get by on at a time when jobs, this guy ran on jobs, and more jobs, and he's telling you the only way you can deal with this radical, drastic budget is to lay off more people all over the state of Wisconsin. And, you know, that is appalling. What's happening to the schools is appalling, losing $1 billion in public education. The only thing, there's one thing he did in this budget, I guess I would say I'm glad he did, because he shows what's really behind it. A whole lot of people did not understand why, for years now, Republicans have been supporting vouchers for private schools. Vouchers for low-income children, black children, Latino children. This is a Republican proposal when we know that, frankly, the Republicans don't care very much about the poor, don't care anything about children of color. But in this budget, what Scott Walker does removes income limits from vouchers. While he's wiping out funds for everything else in the state of Wisconsin, he's increasing funds for private vouchers so that rich people who send their children to private schools can also get vouchers from the taxpayers, not just poor kids. That's the only honest thing in the budget, because that shows really what this guy's values are. Every legislature and every governor has faced a budget shortfall, and everyone has been able to do it without drastically devastating the state of Wisconsin, and Scott Walker is the first one who hasn't been able to do that. And I think this should be a controversial budget, and this fight is going to continue.
Denise, what do you think he's trying to do to MPS?
Well, I don't know what he's trying to do to MPS, but I know what the impact is on children. As our superintendent said last night in a public hearing that was absolutely packed at central office, it does significant damage to the children of the Milwaukee Public Schools, and it hurts them in a way that's disproportionate to what's happening in the rest of the state. What we're going to see in Milwaukee Public Schools, what's going to happen to our children, is that we see a $74 million reduction in the aid that we get from the state. Here's how that breaks down. Each classroom, for every child that's sitting in every classroom, there's going to be $555 less next year in aid. That in itself is bad enough, but we're also seeing some other significant cuts, programs that are eliminated. We're seeing an elimination of funds that help support our math teacher leaders, which is significant as we're taking a look at ways that we're trying to improve our math scores for children. We're seeing an elimination in some of our AP grant money that really helps particularly low-income children take and prepare for the AP coursework that they need. We're seeing some cuts in school breakfast programs for poor children. We're seeing an elimination of programs that help at-risk children. We're seeing cuts in AOTA money. We're seeing cuts in Head Start programs. We're taking a look at those programs that help the poorest of the poor students, and they're gone. Now, that's already on top of $13.6 million that we cut from our budget just to get to the point where we thought we'd be with state aids kind of remaining as they have over the years with about a $200 per pupil increase. So this is really, it hurts the children in the Milwaukee Public Schools. It hurts the kids who are in the classroom. Guess what, folks? It's not just MPS. We may bear the brunt of it, but every single classroom in this state is going to see the impact in a negative way of this budget on education in classrooms for children.
But guys, what about his argument that, again, he uses the word tools, that I am giving all these different entities the tools to make up that money if you approach your labor force and say, you pay more for your benefits?
Unfortunately, and this budget is going to require some serious reworking by the legislature. The governor has already signaled that he understands that. He's open to it. No governor ever gets 100% of what they request, and this governor certainly would be fortunate to come out with anywhere from 60 to 70% of that budget intact. There are pieces, and Denise had talked about some of them. For example, MPS takes a $75 million hit, even if you were to try to close that gap with the givebacks on the pension and health care costs, the same percentages that state employees are asked to take. You only come up with about $50 million of the $75 million. And if you couple that with the $13 million that was already taken off the last year's budget in order to come up with this year's budget, you're not close to being able to make up the difference by making additional cuts without laying people off. The math teacher leader initiative that had been put in the budget for about $9.9 million has demonstrated effectiveness in raising math scores for students, particularly in the K through third grades. And there's some promise for future grades. So those are the kinds of arguments that are going to have to be made to the legislature regarding just how do you keep momentum going to improve education, to improve academic success, and at the same time, how do you make sure that Milwaukee students are not punished? Because the students ultimately are the ones that get punished when there's not enough in there in the tools to make sure that MPS stays on track. The other piece, I took a look at the UW budget, and when Jim Doyle came into office, he cut $280 million out of their budget in the first year, and they came back and backfilled mostly with tuition increases. I don't expect that the UW system initiative, or not the UW, the governor's initiative to spin out the two doctoral granting universities, Madison and Milwaukee, I don't think that that's going to go through intact. I think you already have some legislative leaders, Steve Nass, who chairs the Assembly Committee on Colleges and Universities. I think he's already given indications that he's a little wary of that plan. So you're going to see some things that will be reworked in that piece as well. And when you get over into the side where you're talking about Medicaid, and some of the other social service initiatives that require a heavy infusion of federal dollars, that require some negotiation with the federal government, I think you're going to see some give and take there as well. So by and large, the budget that the governor presented will go through in substantial measure, but not in total measure. And you're going to see one of the most massive lobbying efforts ever to hit Madison in the next few months so that as this is being reworked, and it's almost going to be everybody for themselves unless people take a look at this and say there's some need to have mutual support when they approach the legislature about these various initiatives. The community is going to have to prioritize what is most important and fight for that, because they're not going to get it all either. The governor won't get everything he asked for. Local communities aren't going to get everything that they asked for, but some are going to be winners if everyone goes in and they fight for themselves.
So far,
do you
Republican
see him-
leaders
do you see him-
have not argued with Scott Walker about anything. All they have done is rubber stamped everything he gives them. I don't see where you get this idea that suddenly the Republicans are going to stand up to Governor Walker.
Do you see him? Do you see him starting to back down?
Not at all.
As the poll numbers seem to indicate that maybe he is losing some support. Do you see him starting to back down?
Losing support?
Yes,
That's what the
losing
most recent
support
poll
all
numbers
over the
said.
state.
I don't think so. There was a poll taken in November, and it put Scott Walker in office. It put Republicans in control
And
of
he
the
didn't
state.
propose a
Now, I
single
let
one
you
of
guys
these
talk
things.
for 10 minutes, all right? And I didn't say a word.
you're gonna-
but I have
I
my
have no
say
qualms
now.
about you having enough
Please,
time to talk.
Please. The voters put in a Republican-controlled state Senate with a huge majority. And they put in a Republican-controlled assembly with a huge majority. I don't see Governor Scott Walker backing down. I don't see a sizable number of Republicans backing down from their support of this governor. $3.6 billion deficit. Something has to give. And unfortunately, Scott Walker has to be the person that does the heavy lifting now, because previous governors and previous legislatures refused to do it. They have pushed this problem to the point where we are at now, and we don't have many choices but to make these kinds of painful cuts. But the reductions are far outweighed by, the savings far outweigh the reductions if you let local governments and school systems ask their employees to pay more so that the cost to the state isn't as much. Now, we've got a $3.6 billion deficit. I think everything is on the table. We don't have stimulus money, a one-time stimulus money anymore. It's gone. We don't have one-time tobacco settlement money.
Republicans
it's gone.
blew it.
It's gone. We can't raid the Patients' Compensation Fund anymore. We can't raid the Transportation Fund anymore. So we can't sit here and cry and the sky is falling, which it is not. We fixed this budget now, and we're going to be good for years and years and years. We're going to have to swallow some bitter pills, and schools are going to have to do more with less, and local governments are going to have to do more with less. But that's because we've got a big hole to get ourselves out of, and you don't tax and spend your way out of it. You do have to make some of these painful cuts, and MPS will be fine. I think a lot of kids will take advantage of these new opportunities to go to choice schools and go to charter schools and go and do virtual schools. And maybe there will be fewer people working at MPS, and maybe there will be more minority kids going to schools that they and their parents want them to go to. That's not a bad thing when we offer kids more educational opportunities than MPS, which we have thrown money at and thrown money at and thrown money at, and you know what? It still isn't any better. Now, I will admit I was wrong about school choice. I will admit I was wrong.
Anybody else going to be able to talk?
I was wrong about school choice at the beginning. I said that school choice was good because it would foster competition and it would force MPS to improve themselves. Well, since school choice came around, no. MPS is just as bad a school system as it was when school choice started.
They hired Denise.
But at least we should have. At least,
are we going to filibuster, or is anybody else going to be able to talk?
A long time.
I did not talk as long as you did,
I think it's
Kevin.
wonderful. It's not bad what's happening in the governor's budget. It's wonderful that we are saying to parents all over the state.
It's wonderful.
You're not.
To lose $1 billion in education is wonderful.
Restricted to this one-fits-all school system, this monopoly. You can go to any school you want, and that's a good thing. And when school choice first started, all I heard from moderate income families was, well, now, wait a minute. Why can't I take advantage of this? Why can't I work hard? My wife works hard. Why can't we take advantage of school choice? Now they will be able to, and that's a good thing.
If we can get another word in.
A completely different MPS 2 years from now than we see today.
Well, I think that it remains to be seen what happens with school choice. But let's get some facts on the table and not some hyperbole. The fact is that the difference that we're talking about in terms of what is being cut from school districts and what the potential, and let's make sure we call it that, the potential is in terms of savings don't match. They do not match. And there are many school districts like MPS, which did not rush in at the last minute to settle their contracts with unions, which are locked in for 2 years. So you're talking about savings, which in fact cannot begin to be realized until 2 years from now. So that's a fact. When we also take a look at facts, let's also talk about the facts in terms of what's really happening in terms of the governor's budget repair bill. It was reported today at 5 o'clock on TMJ4. Mick Treavey did a one-on-one interview with the governor where the governor said he is negotiating with Democrats. And let's talk about facts when it comes to the most recent polls. The most recent polls show, and this is by Rasmussen, which tends to be a right-leaning polling organization, that in the state of Wisconsin, people favor by significant margins the way that Democrats are handling both the budget repair bill and this whole issue of collective bargaining. 56 to 44 and 42 to 41. So that's a significant difference where people in this state have said that they prefer the way that Democrats are handling this budget process as opposed to the governor. Let's not also make any mistakes.
They're going to have to come back someday.
What we're talking about when it comes to MPS, when we're talking about what's going to happen is it is hurting children. We're not talking about what's happening to the system. That's the easy way to do it. You can say, oh, what's going to happen to the system? There are going to be fewer people working there. The reality is what's going to happen because of this budget bill is going to impact kids. It's going to impact classrooms. And let's not forget, this is not just something that's going to impact MPS. Tomorrow, Saturday, there are 2 hearings that are taking place, or 2 meetings that are taking place on what's happening in terms of the budget as it relates back to schools and school funding. One is in Milwaukee. The other one is in Greenfield. People know that this budget, as it is set up, has the potential to hurt children across the state. And I think Gerard is right in terms of saying there's going to be a lot of lobbying, but what you're going to see there is similar to what you saw when it came to the budget repair bill. You're going to see people there who are going to be hurt by what's happening. You're going to see parents there. You're going to see children there. Yes, you're going to see teachers back there again, because teachers care about students. And I know Kevin may not believe that, but they do. And that's why they're going to be there. So, I think what we are seeing is a groundswell of people who are rightfully very concerned about the impact this budget is going to have on children across the country, not just poor kids in MPS.
If what Kevin said was true, that this was the result of past governors, Republican and Democrat, and past legislatures throwing it all on poor Scott Walker, the truth of the matter, that would mean that Scott Walker was facing a bigger budget deficit than past governors, and it's just the opposite. He is facing half the deficit that Jim Doyle faced the last time he made a budget. And so they haven't kicked it all towards. Let me say something about one-time fixes. I keep hearing this cliche out of Republicans that, it's terrible that in the past we've just done one-time fixes. It's a 2-year budget. Every 2 years, a governor and a legislature come up with a one-time fix for a 2-year budget so that we can have education in this state, so we can have medical care for the poor in this state, so we can have aid going to local governments so they don't have to lay off all their employees. They have done it every 2 years. This is the first time with this budget, this governor just in office, that a governor has not been able to do that. That the governor says all we can do is just devastate employment, and we're going to give tools to the local governments so that they can lay off more employees too. First we'll lay them off at the state, and then local government and school districts and everybody else can lay off employees. That doesn't solve anything. As we're coming out of a recession and we need employment in this state, laying off people and gutting their wages is not a solution. And you know what? I'm really starting to suspect Republicans, they don't want this nation to recover economically. There are economists who just put out a report last week saying the deep, devastating cuts that Republicans in Congress are proposing right now endanger the economic recovery. Something like 100 economists signed that. I think that's the plan. I think that's Scott Walker's plan. I think that's the Republicans on the national level's plan. We don't want recovery under President Barack Obama, because if this nation is in economic misery in 2012, he'll be easier to beat. That is evil. That is un-American. That is hurting the American people for the sake of partisan
Dan,
advantage.
do we get a chance to respond to that malarkey? I know you're trying to be very courteous.
If that were the plan, you are right. It would be evil. It would be absolutely sinister. I don't believe that that is the plan. I believe that Republicans do believe in prosperity for everyone. We have
They don't believe in job creation.
Yes, they do.
They believe in laying people off.
Well, we have a huge divide in this country philosophically as to how
right now,
we get to economic prosperity, and economic prosperity plans have certainly not had broad enough appeal. If it's a Democratic Party plan, they're not getting the kind of support from Republicans that Democrats would probably want to see. And those that Republicans surface aren't getting the kind of support that they would like to see from Democrats. When either party gets in power, they have then the opportunity to affect their plans. This is the Republicans' opportunity to put their plan in place. Now, my argument is that there are still some huge gaps in fairness in how this plan is going to affect certain groups in this state. And particularly when it comes to kids in Milwaukee who go to Milwaukee Public School. Everyone here certainly is acknowledging that there's a disparity in how much money Milwaukee Public Schools should get in order to educate those kids that come there. 20% of the kids in MPS are special needs students. Those special needs students aren't in the same percentage represented in other school districts. That's certainly not going to decrease in MPS, and yet the expectation is that those kids will meet their educational plans.
And those kids aren't
fewer
resources educated at all in voucher schools. And you know that, and that's where the money's going now.
I would agree.
There are some poor voucher schools, but most of them will do a pretty good job.
You also have the voucher schools.
At half the cost.
It's not half the cost.
At half the cost of the pupil cost.
Not taxable.
It's two-thirds of the cost.
6,000 as compared to 12 or 13,000.
You know,
as
Kevin,
compared
that's
to
not
about
true.
10 or
You know
so.
that.
But the problem still exists, that the disparity is out there and hasn't been addressed. And until that gets addressed, then we're still going to have the problem that we have now.
Gerard, you want to talk about disparities.
A $75 million gap that can be made up only two-thirds of with give-backs from employees. That still leaves $25 million in the hole.
30 seconds for Kevin.
You want to talk about disparities? We have a structural deficit, meaning we've been spending and spending and spending, and we've got programs that cost this. The problem is that the revenue to meet those costs is this. We don't have it, because there's the people have been laid off. They have been losing their jobs, and the taxpayer simply cannot keep up with the cost of all of these state programs that we've been doing, and something's got to give. And Scott Walker is finally doing something for the beleaguered taxpayer.
Whatever we have
a state that has a substandard school system.
We've got to add 20 minutes.
Before we end the discussion, let's hear from Rick Horowitz. Rick's been in the journalism business a while, and he really knows a big story when he sees one. Rick.
Because it's also important, because so much is at stake, because the issues on the line here in the Badger State go right to the heart of the nation's own deep political divide. Wisconsin Republicans have now taken away the Democrats' copying machine privileges. No, really. And their parking spaces. And they can't get direct deposit for their paychecks anymore. That'll show them. What's next? Thumbtacks on their chairs? Prank calls in the middle of the night? Oh, wait, a couple of GOP legislators are actually circulating a bill to ban prank calls. Must have hated listening to a certain someone talking to his pretend billionaire pal last week. But banning them? I guess it's easier than making stupid illegal. So what's next? Stomping their feet? Holding their breath until they turn purple? And all because they can't give Scott Walker his tools. The tools. That's what he keeps calling them. The tools to solve the financial crisis. It sounds so workmanlike, so professional. Not a hint of ideology in there. You've got a leak, he's got a wrench. You've got a flat, he's got a jack. And also a tire iron to kneecap those pesky unions. Or is it impolite to mention that? So what else is in Scott Walker's tool shed? Well, there's the oversized screwdriver with the matching screws. Yeah. There's the pocket calculator, so he can figure out exactly how much money the unions have been giving to Democratic candidates and causes and how much less they'll be able to give if he cripples them. There's the carpenter's level, so he can make sure his policies tilt far enough to the right to satisfy the Koch brothers and his other corporate financiers. The smartphone with the special app that lets him turn his 52-47 win last November into an absolute mandate. Or maybe we should call it the not-so-smartphone. There's the tape measure, so he can start dreaming about his White House drapes. And, of course, the chainsaw, that's out back, and the axe and the sledgehammer, so he can balance the budget by whacking away at the university system and the public schools and recycling programs and Medicaid recipients and welfare recipients. You get the idea. So when you think of tools, think of Scott Walker.
Well, thank you, Rick, and thank you so much for watching. Stay warm. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Rick, did you just call the